So the topic of today is mainly about, what tools and approaches do we need to build out a meaningful metaverse? And I think we could probably talk about ours, because if I take every single word in that question, tools, approaches, build out, meaningful is probably also a very important word, and metaverse. So, so the metaverse, will not develop, as the internet did, maybe, I think most of you are probably even too young to have the experience I had, at that time, but the internet basically came out of the military world, and not on, without any real consideration, of commercial, private business and all that kind of stuff. Metaverse is now coming in a much later stage where, a lot of has been done already with the internet, and it's going to be the new internet from that point of view. But with already some different approach, much more private companies, not just military and all that. So completely different world coming up. So I think the best to start, we will talk a little bit about that. But of course, we will probably do a lot of reference, to Meta, so the new name of Facebook. But I think for me, the key goal is also to say, okay, Meta is one thing, but it is much more out there than just Meta. Meta is just what was probably more in the press for older people. But if you follow the metaverse, there's much more out there from that point of view. So my proposal, is to have, of course, a few questions, for the next minutes or hour, and each of you will have to the opportunity to answer those questions. But I would still like to do first an additional round of introduction, because I think what we just had was nice, but I read, to your bio, and there's much more to say than just these few words, So I think we are lucky to have a good mix, of, two guys out of the ecosystem of Berlin, which is a very dynamic, ecosystem. I love there, I went a few times because of that. It's a nice city, but it's also a nice environment, for startup and dynamic and all that, So it's a very lively and nice city. And then, of course, we couldn't talk about metaverse and blockchain and whatever, without a representative from the US. So maybe if you want to give a little bit more, and I will have even some special question, maybe starting with Leo, because I think this whole fashion tech is also something I'm quite exciting. And I heard the first time about that probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I found it a very interesting concept where a lot of people were thinking, they are just crazy, So what I heard about is a company, I don't know if you know, but in Singapore called Republique, and they were already 3 or 4 years ago having some nice selling about this, virtual fashion, and that is also very trendy in terms of sustainability and all that, because, you're not shipping. We know the bad reputation of the normal fashion business in terms of sending all over the world, and the fashion tech is quite interesting. So maybe Leo, if you want to introduce yourself and your business first.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, Style Exchange, we do virtual fashion NFTs that we bridge into the metaverse for people to wear. I think the use case should make sense in everyone's eyes. If you look at metaverse in the future, as we see it, is that we're all going to be spending a lot of times in these virtual worlds, and people want to personalize themselves just they do right now on the streets if you go outside. So we're trying to build this bridge for people to actually bring virtual fashion NFTs into utilization, because as of right now, there's a lot of NFTs you can buy and also fashion NFTs, but I think the really important part and the real, scalability and fun for people will be when you can actually wear them into these different worlds. So this is the one thing I do, Style Exchange, and we're one of the 2 participants now that are here based in Berlin. And the other thing I do is I also manage a crypto family office called Decentralized Capital, which is based in Munich and Berlin. where we invest in DeFi and blockchain VCs. Yeah, and that's, I think, introduction to what Style Exchange is, where I come from and my involvement in the crypto space. And I don't want to take too much time now to leave some room for the others to introduce themselves.
Thank you very much, Leo. So let's just move next door. You know, I think Ingo is probably not that far from you in terms of geography. So Ingo, if you want to explain a little bit, I think you also have multiple hats, you know, in terms of BOT Labs, but also about Kilt Protocol. So if you want to shortly introduce yourself and what you're doing and your companies basically are doing.
Yeah, so I mostly do things on Kilt, so I just talk about Kilt. Kilt Protocol is a blockchain. It's a level 1 blockchain. It's part of the Polkadot universe, but that's probably not so important. What it does, it manages digital identities. And digital identities basically consists of two things. One is identifiers, and the other is verifiable credentials. You could, if you translate this to the physical world, one thing would be your face. That's the identifier. I identify through my face, and then I have verifiable credentials, which could be, for example, my passport, my driver's license, or my library card, and those have a picture of my face on, so they are linked together. And we're doing this for the digital world, and this is, of course, something which also comes to play in metaverses, because, of course, you have a digital identity there, and maybe you don't want it totally centralized in one database of one big company with 4 letters in the future, but maybe you want to own your credentials and be the master of your faith, basically, and decide who you show your credentials to. And maybe you want to even take a credential and use it in one metaverse and then use the same thing in another metaverse. So it somehow needs to be compatible. And we do all the standardization work and all the groundwork, basically, for enabling such technologies.
Yes, so I think it's also very interesting. You know, I'm also an executive advisor for WiseKey, a Swiss company, you know, which is also in that space. And of course, this whole digital identity was a topic before we talked about Metaverse. You know, it was already something which was, I think, underestimated and didn't get enough attention, I would say, with the previous internet and whatever digital presence that we had. Mm-hmm. So now moving to sorry to say that, you know, to a colder place. So we just talked about temperature before, you know, but Stefan is in Minnesota. So unfortunately, we heard about some news which are not always nice about, you know, this whole storm going around, you know, from Minnesota, Ohio to the East Coast. So I hope that you are in a safe place, you know, and in a warm place. So up to you, Stefan, for the introduction.
Hey, thank you so much for that. Yeah, we're definitely staying warm here. We're used to it. It's business as usual for us. But my name is Stephen Fluin, and I am head of developer relations for Chainlink Labs, working on the platform known as Chainlink. If you haven't heard of Chainlink before, effectively what Chainlink does is it's a platform that enables developers to connect smart contracts, NFTs, those sorts of things, to real-world data and real-world capabilities, as well as connecting across different blockchains. So if you're out in the space and you're building some cool NFT, how do you make that NFT better? By empowering it with connectivity, so you can have an NFT that changes over time or evolves based on things that are happening in the outside world, or how can you make that NFT more dynamic, all those sorts of things. And so we do a ton of stuff, and really my job is to help folks be successful. How do we help developers build the kind of the future and the next generation of these smart contracts and these technologies that are built on blockchain, so they can do better and better.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So let's start with the first question. So the first question is, how will the metaverse change our experience of presence, you know, and will the meta direction be realized? So I'm sorry, you know, for the question. Of course, we can talk. You know, let's focus not just on meta, you know, and I think Ingo already mentioned a little bit. I think let's really talk about the metaverse. But of course, most of the message out there that people heard, let's say not people that much in the business in that business like you, they heard about Meta, from Facebook Meta. So that's why I think we do this reference to Meta, because that's what you find in the regular press. But of course, there's much more, I said, as Meta. So how we will really change, our experience of presence in this metaverse. So let's start maybe in another sequence. So maybe Ingo first.
Yeah, so when we talk about presence in the old internet, or in the internet as we know it right now, we basically do not have anything. So as a user, I don't really have presence. I use something and then it's gone. And when I'm gone, then I'm basically gone. So there's no one who can actually meet me there. So that was on what we call Web 1.0. That changed a little bit in the Web 2.0, where the user could actually also produce things like content, like on the Facebooks and all the Twitters of the world. So we could, as a user, somehow interact. But this still was not some kind of a presence, because it was not my decision in the end where Facebook actually sends the messages that I put out. So when I post something on Facebook, some people can see it, or some people maybe cannot. And the decision about that, about my presence in a way, is made by someone who is a centralized service. This will probably change when this is not the case when you talk about real presence things. Some of them were out there where you actually meet people and directly talk like we do right now. So we do right now have a presence, right? We see each other, and then there's other people who can see us. I think there's going to be much more like this. What we have here in the metaverse in total, because we are going to have some kind of an avatar. We are going to have also clothing for this avatar. We have accessories for this avatar. We will probably have day cream for the avatar. When we are somewhere, we are located somewhere. So the whole concept of location is not inside the internet, but the concept of location is going to be in the metaverse. So if I'm near someone else in the metaverse, I will see his presence and I feel his presence, and I will be able to interact with people just because we meet at the same place, not because we have a Zoom meeting at 4:00 p.m. Right? So I think this is the main difference we will have.
Thank you very much, for a good start, insightful points, so thank you very much, Ingo. So Stefan, so you point about, the experience and the presence.
Sure. So when I think about presence and the metaverse, it draws my thoughts back to how basically my first experiences with the metaverse, which was like online role-playing games, which back in the early 90s was all text-based. And so I had this presence, right? But it was entirely judged on the things that I did and said in this little text command line terminal. And so I look forward to like Second Life, World of Warcraft, and now to the decentralized metaverse. And I really think that there's going to be just an overall increase in presence, right? Like originally I was judged by the words I was putting on the screen, but now I can be judged by much more in terms of the choices of how I act, how I behave. And the other big thing that I think is going to change is the level of ownership, where with historical metaverse systems, everything was centralized, right? Like you had a provider like Meta who kind of controlled everything. And if they made the rules, they made the systems, and the participants weren't in control of their own destiny. The participants were at the whim of that centralized platform. And I think that the way the presence is going to change to a world where individual participants end up controlling the ownership, and they control their own truth that they can kind of bring with them and represent more fully as technology gets more and more advanced.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Thank you, Stefan. So Ingo, what's your point, on the experience of presence, in the metaverse?
You mean Leo?
Sorry, Leo, sorry.
Maybe Ingo has some more things to add as well. I mean, I think I don't want to talk about location more. That's been mentioned now. That's and present. I think that's really relevant. Also, one thing that will really be essential to the transition of metaverse is, I think, character design and kind of like ownership of personal secondary identity. Because when we talk about metaverse, maybe to define metaverse a little bit. In my opinion, the metaverse happens once when people have their own unique character and get together in virtual spaces locally to do things, because we have this discussion internally often that some of our advisors or people I know say a metaverse theoretically is already a Zoom call, what we have right now. I would disagree, and I would say a metaverse is only when certain things fall in place that also enable a decentralized community. Also, with regards to something you said in the very beginning, that before we had Web 2.0, now we're going to have Web 3.0, which is going to be a more decentral thing, but still having private entities operating data. And I think the final stage that, at least in our perspective, is something we should all aim forward to, is a really decentralized metaverse in all aspects, also with communities being able to create value by themselves.
Yeah, and I think these are key points, because that's the whole concept that still a lot of people don't understand about this decentralized piece, because even I think on, I don't want to talk too much about cryptocurrency, because we have, I think Ingo is probably a better expert, but where did this whole cryptocurrency come from? It was about the lack of trust, of the younger generation into the establishment, about the centralized banking and everything. And of course, when all that exploded, and became stronger, you still have those big banks still trying to get a grip on that, because they are against these decentralized things. And maybe, that's also why we might have the challenge, with Meta, because Meta, or let's call it still Facebook, if some people still better understand, it's they still would like to control that wall, while the concept of this whole decentralization is going in the opposite direction. It's about not getting centralized organization controlling that. So next question, to you three is also, what technology advances need to be made to create a richer sense of presence? So let's start with Stefan maybe this time. And
Sure,
anyhow,
sure.
it's a more technical question. So you are the expert, for the, for the technology advances.
Yeah. So when I think about technology, I always do try and drive it back to user experience, because I feel that technology ultimately should be designed for users. And I think the big technology enhancement that we are going to see, or need to see, is this idea of bringing the metaverse to where people are, right? Because we have these immersive realities where I put on a VR headset, I've got a virtual land, but there has to be different modalities of delivery of that. So, right, we have the VR, the full 360, it feels like I'm sitting next to someone. But then also, what does that metaverse feel like when I'm not in VR? What does that metaverse feel like when I'm at my computer? What does that metaverse feel like when I'm on my phone, on the bus, or wherever? Just how do we bring the metaverse in various forms and have these modalities that can adapt, but still feel like the connectivity? And I did also want to build on something that Leo said about this idea of a personal secondary identity, which is that I think the richer that you can make that secondary identity, the better the connection and the better the value individuals are going to get out of the metaverse is going to be. I think back to the book Ender's Game, if you've ever read that, where you've got one of my favorite moments in that book is there's these two characters and they create these personal secondary identities, Locke and Demosthenes, who can actually go out and tell stories and have these political essays and have a perspective that is not connected back to their kind of true identity. They can be just judged by the ideas and the things that they create as part of that secondary identity. And I think being able to have that level of authenticity while still being kind of approachable in a metaverse context is a hugely important advancement.
Yeah, and again, I think, what is the key difference today also is the pace of those changes and the technology, especially, I think a few years ago, the technology was much more limiting, in terms of the advances. And now quite often it's not the technology anymore who is the limitation, but of course, if you think about what you just say, some VR devices and all that, of course, we should have something, let's say, more seamless in the future, that the big VR glasses and stuff like that. So I'm confident that a lot of that, will also progress quite quickly.
It used to be, this was not quite a step in the right direction, but for about 3 years, a long time ago, I wore Google Glass every day. And this idea of having assistive reality where I could bring technology with me in all my everyday interactions was fantastic. And when I just look at like the technology we have in our pockets and in front of us, and I extrapolate out, I think within, I don't know, who knows what timeline, but 30 years, basically every wall, every surface around you is going to be a display, a touch screen, a camera, a microphone. And so how could you bring the metaverse to you so that like it's sitting in the same room as you instead of having to put on a VR headset?
So thank you very much. So maybe Leo, your addition, on that topic about, required technology advances, to make it smoother.
Sure. I'm not a big expert on hardware when it comes to VR and AR, other than seeing what's on the market right now. But what I think is going to be the big step where we're headed in the long run, I think, is really being able to feel sensory through devices of actions in the metaverse. And also to make a pop culture reference, I think this movie Ready Player One, maybe there's also a book to this that I haven't read, but I think this is kind of a scenario that most of the people that I know of in the metaverse space are thinking we're headed, and what would be missing right now to enable this future world, dystopia to some, utopia to others, is really the technology of being able to feel on your skin and experience movement and some kind of real life equivalent physical touch or object touch in the metaverse. And I think this is what's going to be at some point the final step to a society where probably time spent in metaverse will be over time spent IRL.
No, I think very interesting. I recently had a keynote speech at a conference in China, where I talked about metaverse basically for the industrial manufacturing, so heavy industrial manufacturing. And I came a little bit with the metaverse topic to say, look, with the digital twin stuff in manufacturing, you are not too far from the metaverse discussion, in manufacturing, you're adding people and all that. But that's still why I'm talking about that is because of what you said, the sensing sensor. The big progress in manufacturing was done, because of IoT and the sensors and all that. So that's what allowed a lot of things, on the shop floor in manufacturing. And I think that's exactly the point, the parallel I can make with what you said, to have this additional sensor stuff added, for the humans, in the metaverse. So, Ingo, now it's your turn, to add on the technology advances that you would see, to make a richer sense of presence.
Now comes the boring infrastructure guy. We heard a lot about interfacing. This is really important. This is really important to get the users in this thing. But I think another thing that is totally needed is that and Stefan also pointed to that, the metaverse will not always be 3D and shiny. It will be sometimes 2D and on my desktop screen. Sometimes it will be just on my phone and stuff like that. And it will be necessary, I think, to also connect different metaverses, because one company can never do it alone. So we will need many companies working on metaverses, and then we will need companies working on things in this metaverse, and then we will have companies inside the metaverse and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that has to be done on the groundwork actually, and I think we need a lot of standardization basically on how those things can interoperate, because all those things need heavy investment. And if you need to do heavy investment, you somehow you must rely on something, and that can only be a standard. So it must be clear, if I build something, it's going to work with this metaverse, it's going to work with that metaverse, and the third metaverse as well. And this is where we are right at the beginning, I would say, right? And we need to do a lot of work to discuss and to formalize and to standardize, and also put it into protocols, how things in metaverses do actually interact, how metaverses interact, and all those things. And there's a lot of technology to be built, which is not ready. And the danger is actually, if we leave it all to one company and say they will build that, then they will basically also make sure that no one else benefits from it. And this is why it is so important that we start working on bridging between all those companies which are now building inside metaverse and saying, here's already something, could you use it, and how can you put it together? And this is what I think what needs to happen. And if not, we will get some kind of a metaverse that basically really nobody wants.
Yes, I think I feel your years of experience in what you're saying, you know, because I think we went to all of that pain, you know. I think one of the key aspects, you know, and we're still lacking, and, you know, in the blockchain space, we talk a lot about that as well, is the whole interoperability. You know, that's what the user is dreaming about, you know, but behind that, as you said, there is a lot of standards and definition technology to make these things interoperable, you know. And again, as you said, maybe there are as many people or company who wants that as people who want the opposite, as you said, to keep their standard, that it's only working for them and that you are bound to them, you know.
Yeah, if you look across the whole blockchain ecosystem today compared to a year ago, there are more chains, there's more complexity. It is harder to be a user or developer in the space because we don't have that interoperability today. And so, like, for example, this idea of having a standard that's not controlled by one company is such an important thing. And I know that we're trying to help create those sorts of standards, right? Like, nobody owns HTTPS. And so we're trying to help create some of those standards for the future with, like, we have what we call our cross-chain interoperability protocol that is open source, and we want the world to be able to take advantage of that, hopefully at some point.
And so thank you very much for the addition. I said it's still not too technical, you know, but I think that's what people as a user really think it's easy, you know. When it works, it's easy, but they don't see what is behind the scene to make that work, you know. And again, we will have more and more of those challenges. So thank you very much. So sorry, next question is, you know, what is currently working best in the metaverse? So let's say, because of saying maybe we started what is missing, what we should have more, you know, what is actually working the best in the metaverse? So Ingo, maybe this time let you start.
Okay, then now I start with the interface. I think the interfaces have really been improved. So when you look like what, so there were things like 3 years ago, and you needed to have a huge, very expensive computer under your desk, which would make a lot of noise. And then you would get some VR machine on your head, which was really heavy, and the experience was so. It was 3D, and but if you look at the modern things that you basically just put on your head, and they don't even need a computer, somehow they work, and the whole computer thing emerged somehow into the goggles, basically. This is really amazing. This is what I think is working. So the advances which have been made over the last years there are phenomenal. And if you visit those VR lands now and play games there, it is very close to actually understanding what's happening there with your brain. Your brain gets really sucked into it, and the experience is great. And I think if more people would have the experience, the whole thing would even be much faster, because this is kind of addictive.
Okay, thank you very much. So sounds, let's say, very positive. So we got a very positive message on that side. Leo, what is your take on that? You know, what is working best in the metaverse from your point of view?
Well, the accessibility is we're starting to get there, definitely. As Ingo said, that's correct. Also, one thing that's working already is real estate investment. From the land perspective, the tech savvy people have understood that there's value to be gained in owning land in the metaverse. We see this working on every metaverse, land pricing increasing rapidly. What's missing, however, is yet the real mass demand of people actually going there and utilizing services that are offered. But that's the one thing that I kind of think of right now that's already working, which just, I think, shows that in terms of the tech community and the people behind all of this, there is enough visionaries and people interested around the world in this space that have understood that there's opportunity and a future to be made. But yeah, we're lacking mass adoption, I think, in terms of demand. Yet.
Yeah. Yes, I think you're totally right, but I still say, again, I said, I'm an older generation, so for years, it took much longer to make the I could even not say the small steps, because what's happening now for me are big steps, just talking about metaverse or NFT, a few months ago, who talked about NFT? So I was just saying it's unbelievable how quickly these topics are still becoming, more common, and of course there are still a lot of people out there who don't know what it is, but it's moving very, very, very quickly. Yeah? So I think, of course, for us it's maybe not moving quick enough, but I'm still impressed, and maybe later we could also have a discussion about China, because I also work with China, and it's just crazy, I don't know how they are going to face that challenge, because on one side, the technology, they are much more advanced, but also what the Chinese government is about, about controlling everything. So you see up and downs there in terms of, the whole blockchain, metaverse, NFT and all that. So it's a completely different story, because, for definitely China is a country, where is a lot of control. And here we talk about decentralized control, so it's something completely different. So back to the US, Stefan. So after a short, quick episode in China from my side.
Yeah, so I would say overall, when we look at the decentralized metaverse space, there definitely is a lack of adoption. But I look at the broader metaverse world, and I think that there have been a lot of successes that we can learn from as we're trying to build out decentralized systems. And what I look at is places that don't even consider themselves metaverses today, like World of Warcraft, Fortnite, where the thing that works best for them is they have this presence, and you end up having human connections. You end up having community where people want to spend their time in these virtual worlds connecting to people that they've never physically been near, because of the human connections that these systems are allowing and establishing. And I think that's true if you look at any metaverse system, is the attractiveness of the system is directly proportional to the people who are there, right? These network effects are very, very strong. And I think that the fact that people are finding human connections there, and they are spending time there, is a very strong kind of validation of the idea and the vision.
Yeah, so thank you very much, and I'm really happy how our discussion is driving, and I'm going to skip one or the other question, because I don't feel them that relevant, in the direction we take now. So my next question would be, and I probably know already your answer, but will there be one metaverse or several large walled gardens? So let's take Leo to start.
I mean, I think from what I understand in this discussion, I think we're all aware of the fact that there's going to be several metaverses. I think that in the way metaverse is, as I said, from my personal definition, standard is that metaverse is accessibility to anyone, and there will be different metaverses for different occasions, like a fantasy metaverse, World of Warcraft style, and out of these there will be probably 5 or 6 different ones. There will be professional metaverses such as LinkedIn in 3D. I don't think it's realistic to have one one place or governed by one entity, because then this would arguably also not be a metaverse anymore because it's a central owned identity. That's my take.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know more or less the answer to the question.
Yeah,
It's obvious, you know, when we started the discussion, but still to get the confirmation, and still interesting to also what you say, you know, about, you know, how are we going to deal also ourselves, you know, as a person in this different metaverse, because we may be different person in different metaverse. You know, because I said if you're gaming and LinkedIn and so it's you will have multiple personalities, you know, or avatars, you know, in this different metaverse.
Exactly, and there will be metaverses where you maybe want people to know your identity, such as a LinkedIn 3D world, and places where you might not want people to know your actual identity, and there will be different standards for different metaverses. Probably, you know, universal standards for bridging in some of these metaverses where you want to chain your data from one to the other, maybe a LinkedIn network, and then there's a, I don't know, a health network where you can exchange with others in terms of, you know, disease management. I don't know what's to come, and then multiple networks or metaverses where you want different identities, and then some of these identities will probably be bridgeable between different metaverses, and some won't. It's I think it's a, I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot that can happen. There's a lot of potential.
We are clear that they're going to be multiple metaverse, and I will naturally move to Ingo on that discussion topic, because sorry, maybe Ingo is also a point where we could also readdress, you know, one of your expertise, you know, in the digital identity and all that, because again, the question is, you know, will there be one metaverse of multiple? I think the answer is clear, but maybe it's also the time to maybe address some of your points, you know, regarding digital identity.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we can agree that there will be many metaverses, and some of them will be connected and some of them will be walled gardens for whatever reason. As I said in the beginning, we will need to get these things operational and quick. We need to agree on different things which we haven't agreed on when we built the internet. When we built the internet some years ago, like 30, 40, 50 years ago, as you said, it was university and military financing it. But what was so interesting actually about when you compare it to today is that everything that the internet is, and the internet is just things like TCP and IP, right? Real protocol level down there, things which nobody really knows how they function. The interesting thing is that they were all given out to the world for free, and there was no business model behind them. This is why we use things today and every day, and we never pay for them. So I'm not paying Tim Berners-Lee for using HTTP, even though I use it every day. That's a nice thing, because it was possible that, that people start building on this thing, and this is how the internet exploded actually, because it was there for everyone, it was free. And the negative side to that is, if there's no business model inside building those protocol thingies, then it's also not really attractive to develop them further, right? And it's when the military is out, they're out. They don't come back and start developing more things. And this is why we have a protocol level in the internet, which is very, very, very thin, and which can just handle basically to transport some data from A to B. And they were not thinking about payments. They were not thinking about identities. They were not thinking about more complicated things. And this is what's coming on right now. So what we are building, and not only we, but together with many, many other companies, especially in the Decentralized Identity Foundation, where there's more than 200 companies there, including small companies like us, but also bigger ones like IBM and Microsoft. Those people start to agree on standards, how an identity in the digital world should actually be shaped. And it is wrong to not shape it as a standard, as we have seen in the internet, because then somebody comes and says, yeah, identity, I'm going to care for it. All your identity is in my database, very convenient for you. Everything is at my side. And then I control your identity. And basically, when I log into WhatsApp today, which is old Metaverse thingy, then I have this connect to Facebook button there, and then WhatsApp and Facebook exchange information about me without me being even involved and without knowing what they actually exchange. And this is something which is hopefully not going to happen in the next iteration. And now, as we have this next iteration, which we normally call the Web3, there's incentives on the side of building protocols. And this is what makes the big difference. So now we will have pushed into by companies standards on how to actually make a decentralized identity and keep the user and have the user having the grip on it. And this is what we're building. And yes, so I think those standards are necessary to actually enable the people to then build faster. Because if you want to build your metaverse and you have to solve every single problem for yourself, you will probably never finish, right? So you need those things, like you need the hardware, you need building blocks, you need a protocol building blocks and all that, and just put the things together, and then you're much faster in your development, and you're also interoperable with the others. And this is what we have to achieve, because all the creativity in the world needs to be utilized to build something great. And if you build it in a walled garden and say it's just for me and my friends and only people who pay can build something in there, then you're basically probably not building the best thing.
Okay, thank you, Ingo. And I think that's probably an easy move to you, Stefan, you know, because I think you are part of these guys who are helping, you know, to basically put these building blocks and helping the customers, you know, to do that stuff. So
yeah, I look to the internet to answer this question a little bit about whether or not there will be a one walled garden or one metaverse. Like every time someone has tried to create the distributed social network or website or platform or anything like that, it has never worked, right? It's always been multiple destinations, multiple communities. And I think the same thing will port over to the metaverse. The thing I hope for, and I think the thing that I hope developers and users demand, is a stronger concept of ownership and truth. So that if I buy a piece of digital clothing that I can wear in the metaverse, I should own that, and I should be able to carry that with me where I go. So I might not be able to bring my community with me. I might not be able to bring all of my data with me, but as much as I can own and as much of my identity I can own and be in control of that using blockchain technology, I think that is really the success criteria that's going to make the metaverse meaningful for people. And to me, like technologies like NFTs are going to be a huge part of this.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, as said, you know, for a lot of people, the blockchain technology is a new topic, and probably for 80%, it is even just assimilated to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. You know, while there's much more. That's just one example. There's much more behind the blockchain technology. And there's one guy, I don't know if you know Don Tapscott, you know, in Toronto. You know, he's one of the guy who, I think he talked about that 10 years ago, you know, probably people thought it's crazy, you know, but blockchain technology is nothing else for me that, you know, the code and the language for the new web, you know, and it's not, I do it with blockchain or without and all that. I think it's bringing the technology, the trust and all that, you know, that you need to build this new Web3. There will be no Web3 for me without blockchain. That's, if it's without blockchain, then it's not Web3, you know. So the next question, I think we're moving to maybe another topic, you know, which is maybe less technical, but more from a society point of view, you know. So will we bring the same baggage and problems of the outside world into the metaverse, or will we have a more utopian world emerge? So let's start, you know, with Ingo maybe this time.
Oh no, that's the complicated question. Starts with me. I think people are people. They will probably transport all their problems into wherever they go. So that would be my take on that. Even make it as utopian as you want. People still will bring their problems.
Yeah, I'm even thinking sometimes if it could even not be the other way around, because I recently saw just a reportage on the French news, about a young lady, 20 years old, and of course they have their brats and avatar and all that, online, and she's going already with 20 to 10 surgeries, because she wants to look more like her avatar, So I think maybe we could even bring the problem, from the vet, or the good thing from the metaverse is creating a problem in our daily life. Yeah?
Also going to be the same people. Last week I was on a panel, and there were influencers there, and there were marketing people, and there were people producing day creams, and they were thinking of how to entering the metaverse. This was the subject. So you will meet the same people as you meet in the real world.
Yeah.
Again, the metaverse. So they're always, once you enter, they're already there.
Yeah. So Stefan, what is your take about the problems? Are we going to bring the problems, or just have a utopian nice world out there in the metaverse?
So I try to do something very difficult. I try to be both an optimist and a realist at the same time, where I want to acknowledge all the problems and the challenges that we have as human beings, the problems that we bring with us. But I also always want to try and hope for a better future and trying to build towards a better future. And so I do think that there's this shift that can happen where when you are building decentralized, transparent systems, where you can get to a place of truth as opposed to a place of trust. And I mean, I think this is one of the magic powers of blockchain technology, and part of why I work at Chainlink Labs is because this idea that truth can be greater than trust, where if you build a smart contract that operates on the blockchain that distributes NFTs fairly, there's no way for a human to corrupt that or violate that. And I think that's kind of what I hope for and I aspire to, is that we can build fair, equitable systems that maybe perform better and serve humanity better than these organizations where you have to trust everyone in a giant organization to do the right thing, both individually and collectively.
Yeah, I think again, thank you very much, for your positive mindset, and I think that's the point, if you want to do it good, and we can do it, if you want to make problems, you can also think a lot of problems. And at the end, we mentioned before, the military and the invention of the internet and all that, the inventor of the internet, he was sick, about what internet became. So there is a hope to do something different than to rebuild just a new internet, and to do something different, as you said, and I think with a positive mindset. So Leo, what is your take on that one? On the So of course, I'm sure you don't hope that they bring their old clothes, into the metaverse because you want to get your fashion tech there.
I mean, or we help them bring their old clothes into the metaverse. But I'm very optimistic and hopeful. The one thing that I would like to add only is, without becoming too political, I'm personally hoping for topics such as identity and racism to decrease once we make the shift to a more metaverse world, because once you give people the freedom to be whoever they imagine, because at the end of the day, if we get to the stage where in the metaverse you can create your avatar as whatever you like, you get to a stage where we as a society have a second identity according to how we really see ourselves, right? There's been studies on, people's avatars in World of Warcraft is usually related to how they subconsciously identify themselves as. And I would hope that this will result in a decrease in racial bias and discrimination in the future metaverse. But then again, as Ingo said, people are people, and people are sometimes cruel, unfortunately. So we'll see what the future brings.
Yes, I think we can dream about it, and I still think that there are some opportunities, but we could do, of course, exactly the same mistake. We could even do bigger mistake, but again, on one side, I think there's a point that Stefan said, from a technology point of view, with blockchain and the traceability and all that, there is still something that you could probably better control from that point of view. On the other side, in terms, if we talk about, addiction, mental health and all that, of course, there could be a risk, or you could, but if I see what happened today, with the pandemic, I think we have seen much more damage without the metaverse as well, So I think we can also have a positive mindset, as some of you are saying, and hoping about a better metaverse rather than saying the metaverse maybe even becoming worse than our real life in terms of just example, as you said, like racism and all that,
I mean, I personally hope I don't think there's a chance of the metaverse the way I imagine it to be worse than real life, because at the end of the day, everybody involved in this space is about creating and making an enriched environment possible. Yeah, I don't know. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
I agree with you, and we need people like you, to think like that and make it happen like that, because it could also go in the other direction, So it's the same with with internet. You can stop a lot and forbid things and all that. What was the result? You have the dark web. So I think we have to handle things differently, and that's what I really think, metaverse is something different. It's just not just a small iteration, of the internet, because if you want to do bad things, you can do bad things, so people can use the same technology, to do damage. But I think it's, again, I still hope about, the technology and the blockchain, and the whole traceability to avoid some of that. But you cannot avoid everything. But it's also what's happening if somebody does something wrong, with blockchain. Talk about blockchain mining, so not. Let's talk about the proof of stake rather than so if you are in a proof of stake chain and you do something wrong, what's happening? You're not long in the chain, you're going to get excluded, So I think that's a little bit something like that should still happen. But then again, it's the community that decides that, and not a central organization or one person or one company who has the power to decide, who can be on Facebook or not on Facebook, on Twitter, not on Facebook. So I think, again, we need, it doesn't make sense even to start if you are not positive and we don't think that it can be better. Okay, so let's move closer to the end, so some topic for you especially, so what have early projects taught us about the metaverse, both from a tech point of view and from a user point of view, and how will it affect the next generation of tech products? So let's start with Stefan this time.
Sure. I think there's so much we've already learned, but I think there's so much more to learn. I look at projects like Decentraland, who have had a bunch of success in kind of building this kind of decentralized world based on NFTs, based on selling land parcels that exist on the blockchain. But I still feel like everyone that is successful is bridging out and finding those human connections and bringing them with them into the metaverse. And so I think that's going to be key, is you have to build great tech and then find the humans and help and support them.
Yeah, and I like that. And, I didn't mention before, why I put, in my description, digitalization humanist, I think I even had that question in China, and they asked me, what does that mean? So my point is, I'm a big fan, of all these technologies. So from AI, IoT, big data, blockchain, you name it, But my key point, is to use that to serve the human and not the other way around. And I think I'm very happy to have you on the panel here, because I get the same feeling, from you in terms of having this technology, helping the human for a better world, for better things, and not just misusing it, and I think Leo also mentioned that. So Ingo, what's your point about early projects and what they taught us?
I think, so one thing we haven't talked at all about is actually the persistence of things. So when I build a house inside the metaverse, I would expect that when I come back next week, that the house is still there. which is a totally new challenge for databases, actually, because so databases can do persistence, of course, per se, but it's a lot of data which is going to be there, because there's a lot of things if many people actually enter this thing, and this requires a lot of storage, and this requires also a lot of computation. And this lot of storage and lot of computation actually has to be paid for. I think the early things that we see is that probably it would be possible to for people, for a network which provides those computing power and storage power, that they are actually paid for in a way by first owning all the land and then doing this real estate thing, right? And I think what I've seen with great interest actually is how the business models around the metaverse could emerge. And this is basically, this is very, very interesting calculations which you make there, because you sell something once and you basically have to maintain the infrastructure forever for that. And this is also where blockchain is probably going to help with their incentive mechanism. So those things that are happening there are going to be very, very interesting. And I think we haven't learned a lot about the consequences of it. So it's right now it's trying out here and there and here, big country, and they're doing great. And then you have Decentraland, that's also a very good experiment, and all those things, and the business model behind that, and you can watch those things, and that's fantastic actually. But what we have to be honest, we're just trying out, right? And I hope it's not going to be by in the Facebook way, I have to watch a lot of ads to be able to go into the metaverse. So I hope we'll find better ways there. And another thing which hasn't been discussed at all, I would say, is the environmental impact of that. Because if we build metaverses, this is going to cost a lot of energy, probably more than everyone hates Bitcoin, because of they are consuming so much technology, so much electricity. Look at the metaverse, this is going to be worse. Those things also, because persistence costs energy, right? So it's not going away. If you want to have persistence, you put in energy to get this. And so this is going to be an interesting discussion. I haven't seen yet, but I'm really curious to see this in the future as well. But I really like what I see already there in terms of business models. So I think we can learn a lot already. Still not finished, but cool things happening already.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So thank you very much for putting persistence back on the table. It's true that, you know, we had it more or less on our list, but you know, I skipped a point. So thank you for bringing it back, because it's very important. And the second important point, I think we have not talked enough, you know, as you said, about business model. You know, I think it's very important. You know, in my daily business, I think that's the key point, you know, to say we are talking about different business model. People still think with their actual business models, you know, and how they would put that in the metaverse, but a lot will change. And I think it's about, you know, we have to be prepared for new business models, for doing things differently and not the same way, just in a different environment. So Leo, maybe, you know, you can say whatever you want from your point of view, but you can answer also Ingo in terms of, you know, the sustainability, you know, because that's the key point of your fashion tech. You know, you are not sending stuff around via supply chain, you know, with containers and all that stuff, you know. But of course, I think Ingo, you definitely have a point, you know, with the energy, because I think energy did a lot of damage, you know, to the whole Bitcoin story. You know, and of course, once that comes on the table for the metaverse, some people will also shoot, you know, at the technology.
One thing quickly regarding the financing of properties and storage in metaverse is the first thing that Ingo talked about. I think a lot of this is going to be handled over DAOs and small fees here and there that enable the entire ecosystem. At least this would be probably the best case scenario, because as Ingo rightly said, we don't want a lot of paywalls. Regarding the sustainability issue, well, that's a hefty one, and I don't think I'm the expert to discuss electricity consumption and sustainable energy. But what I think is if you look at it from a larger societal perspective, if more time is spent in 10, 20, 30 years in virtual worlds, and as population grows, I'm hoping that we will get to a phase where, because of more time spent in digital worlds and metaverses, there will be less travel and less necessity for things such as shipment, etc., which you just mentioned. In our fashion case, it's a huge USP, of course. Yes, virtual fashion doesn't produce such a carbon footprint or water pollution, and thus making the environment outside in real life, when people are not in their virtual worlds, more sustainable. And also, one thing people always talk about, electricity consumption. Yes, it true, there's a lot of electricity consumption, but at the end of the day, the real discussion should be about where does the electricity come from that is being used, because electricity in itself is not necessarily, bad energy. Electricity is fine. The question is, where does the electricity come from that we use? And if we, as a society, become more sustainable in that sense, as more solar panels, more wind energy, green energy, then I think we can definitely, handle more energy consumption. We just got to actually tackle the source. And this is why I personally always have to, smirk when I hear the Bitcoin argument, because at the end of the day, for me, it's where does the energy actually come from? And I'm hoping to, short sentence, to free up more space on the planet for green energy as we spend more time in virtual worlds, less traveling, etc.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think very valid input. And again, if you say about, the Bitcoin energy stuff, of course, most of it was initially done in China, where we all know that, the energy is mainly coming from coal, so back to your point, but on the other side, are we quick enough, to have the better energy replacing, the coal and everything, so I think that's really the challenge. And I think it should go in parallel, because that's definitely a problem, because we are going to consume more. And I agree, if it's more green, then it's okay. But if it's more coal, then it's not okay. Okay, so I think it's time for us to close. But for close, I give you the last question, the 1 million question, for closing. And then, of course, feel free to add any closing words, important message that you would still pass, in that panel. So the closing question is, if you would have $1 million to invest today in a metaverse app, where would you place your bet? So let's start with Ingo.
I won't tell you the name of a company probably, but it would definitely be infrastructure, because infrastructure is going to be the big winner in the whole thing. So anyone who builds infrastructure in the metaverse and has a good team is probably going to win big time.
Yeah, and especially, as you said, also that the real target being that we pay for that infrastructure, that is not for free, so. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Ingo. Stefan, where would you put your $1 million?
But it's awesome to be working for an infrastructure company when people like Ingo are saying that. But I would personally, I would never do it in a single app, right? I would bet on the whole ecosystem. I would bet on the whole industry.
Yeah, also very interesting. Maybe the question was wrong, should not have been one single app, but it's good. It allows you to give you your good answer, but you're right, I think anyhow today in everything, not just the metaverse, but I think even in traditional business, I'm coming, one of my last jobs was in the pharmaceutical industry, where the big challenge, of course, is also, I think the future is ecosystem. Being, in industry, in IoT or whatever, but also for pharmaceutical. But of course, the big players are resisting to that, because they still have an old business model, which is making money, and paying, and I'm always said, we are not doing healthcare, we are doing sick care. And that's the difference, between sick care and healthcare. The pharma industry, sorry to say that, but they're still living from selling pills. They want you to be sick. Sorry to say that so harsh, but, they make money with sick people, not with healthy people. So I think it's the same kind of attitude, And Leo, should I already write a check? 1 million? What do you do with 1 million? Maybe it's not enough. Huh?
Probably not. Projects that enable more people accessibility, I think, but arguably that's also infrastructure, just projects that enable the metaverse to be accessible to more people and can somehow profit of that. I think those will be the winners. Those can really, the companies that are there once mass adoption funnels in and that are actually, you know, starting or creating this funnel, those are the companies that are gonna profit big time.
Yeah, and thank you very much. That helped me also to close on something else, because I think it's very important. You know, we all have this discussion about the technology and all that. And what you just answer is very important, because you should not forget, I think worldwide, we still have probably about 40% of the population that doesn't have access to internet. So, you know, we talk for the 60% that have access, you know, so your accessibility point, I think it's very important. You know, if you could have more people, and of course, it's physically not always easy. You know, if you talk about, you know, some islands in the Philippines or some countryside in Africa, whatever, there's a lot to do in terms of infrastructure. And I think, you know, Ingo mentioned many times infrastructure. Stefan is working for such an infrastructure company, you know, so I still think, yeah, we can, you know, we should not increase the gap. We should get the other people also on board, you know, on that journey. So thank you very much. It was a very exciting discussion for me. Very interesting. I loved your input, you know, and very insightful. So thank you very much for your panel discussion.
Thank you.
So much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.